I think when you first come to Beijing, you want to convince yourself that you absolutely love this place and you love China and you want to discover China's culture and China's heritage and everything that you see. You try to convince yourself that you think it's really unique and really authentic and you like it. And you go through a period of maybe a month or 2 months like this, and then you start to realize what you had always thought, but that you really hate it. That you hate the traffic, you hate the bad behavior, you hate the way that people treat one another, and the lack of safety in food, safety in crossing the street here. And so then you go through like a hate phase of Beijing and how miserable it is, and the weather's bad, and you breathe in toxic air. So then you go through this long phase of dislike of Beijing, having come to realize that your original misconceptions of Beijing were really just to lie to yourself that you liked the place. And then you go through a phase of apathy, where you just don't care what you think one way or the other, and you're sort of stuck here. And, well, you decided to come here, so you've decided to stay, and there's not much you can do about it, so you might as well make the best of it. And then it sort of starts to become charming to you. The grit, the grunge, the nastiness, and the attempt to develop so quickly becomes endearing, because you learn more about China's history and their struggle over the last 100 years, and you feel for the people and you become part of the people. China is not actually a warring state. They're not a warring people, and they're not people who like conflict. They're actually quite peaceful.
I don't know if proud is the best word to describe my feelings towards being a Beijinger, but I do believe deeply and acknowledge that that's where I come from, and that you can trace its influence and its effects.
If you ask any Chinese person, they'll always tell you, but we've come such a long way. You should see where we were so many years ago. Yes, we have, these terrible aspects of our society now, and we have this terrible pollution, but we have come such a long way, and we've developed so much, and in some respects, it's kind of all been worth it. And that's why they love Mao. Like, the rest of the world's like, Mao sucks. He's like this tyrannical commie, asshole who lost his mind and tried to kill a bunch of people. But you ask Chinese people, they'll be like, actually, you should have seen shit before that guy came along, because we were seriously fucked up.
There's new restaurants, new businesses, new buildings. They're just popping up left and right, and that's really exciting to be part of. And a lot of people, they come here because it started really in 2006, just shortly before the Olympics. It was sort of Beijing's gold rush. Everyone came here for their slice of the pie. And now what we're starting to see is, Beijing now is sort of, it's not in that vibrant, massive growth phase. It's starting to level off and become an established city. In Beijing, every month is a new month. There's new concepts, new ideas, new people coming in. So it's really fresh, and it's fun to be a part of that. But you sort of juggle that in your mind, whether you enjoy that enough to put up with the things such as the pollution, the traffic, a lot of the sort of uncultured aspects.
There's still definitely a premium for being an expat, platinum, if you're white. The entrepreneurial waters are a bit more muddled, so you have an easier time with actualizing ideas and sort of building a base for yourself, just because of the sheer volume of people.
What people don't realize about China is that, especially in particular Beijing, because it is the epicenter of China, is that the best, I think, is yet to come. For me, Beijing was a very spontaneous thing, and that also defines a lot of the ways I see Beijing, is because me coming here was, in and of itself, a sort of very undefined, spontaneous, spur-of-the-moment act. And now I've been here for a little over 4 years. So Beijing is always, it's not just the same thing continued, it's always another new chapter in a book, and there's a lot of change, and for me that change is very important. And so I guess that's why in many ways I'm very positive about Beijing.
I mean, right now Beijing is kind of going through its adolescent phase in terms of the people, And, I mean, in true Chinese fashion, it's going through this adolescent phase as a family, and every generation has a different take. The older people, the grandparents, are largely annoyed at all the out-of-towners who are moving in and being cheap labor, who, do not speak standard Mandarin.
China took communism and put a really interesting spin on it. It created Communism 2.0, the latest, coolest version of communism. And these other countries, Russia or Soviet Union or other communist nations, they kind of stayed in the old world of communism, and they didn't know how to spruce it up. But China, with Deng Xiaoping, came in and said, let's open up the economy, let's grow China, but we're still going to keep all the power. And it's actually been really interesting to see how that's benefit the development of the country, because in places in the West where we have so much bureaucracy, we spend so much time and so much money pumping resources into debate and disagreement with one another. When China says we're going to build, we build, because that's what communism can do. Communism just says we can do whatever it is that we want whenever we want it, and there's no holdup. So that's actually been a great asset to China. And I don't think a system where the entire country could have its input into what's going on in the country or in their local areas or in their provinces would really have been able to launch China to where it is now. You have a country of 1 billion people, most of whom are uneducated, quite ignorant about anything outside of their local areas or their neighborhoods or whatnot, and they don't have the vision or the foresight or the wherewithal to understand where the country needs to go. So in that respect, I think what China has done for itself is good. If we did the American model here, it would just be a mess. Nothing would ever get done. And this place would be just as poor as it ever was, and there would be so much disorganization, and likely just as much, if not more, corruption, right? Because you'd have everybody going in their own direction, trying to squeeze the system and trying to get as much out of it as possible for themselves. Whereas the country took a very centralized approach and took a very authoritarian approach to say, we've got top priorities. Top priorities equal education, economy up, GDP up, and more places for people to live that are more modern and maybe slightly better water. So you can prioritize what is important to your society and to your country. And when I go back to America and people are eating quinoa and they're fighting for animal rights and they're organic and things like that, I think that's absolutely wonderful, but that's a luxury. These are luxury causes in a way. And that is very hard to explain to Americans.
Beijing will grow into itself. It's just a matter of when.
When China wants to build something, it builds something. And when it wants to go fast, it goes fast. When it wants to be big, it goes big. It might screw up along the way, and there might be some accidents here and there, but you know what? Shit happens, and we'll fix it, and we move on, and we're going to be the biggest and the best and the fastest.